Hello, everybody. I'm leaving that in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 34th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I'm one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How we doing this week, Tim?
Oh, fantastic, Rob. Every single mount except the Tazavesh mount and is it Necrotic Wake? No.
Yes.
It's the Bastion dungeon.
The Necrotic Wake. I went to Plaguefall the first time. Yep.
Yeah, I got every single mount except those. You've been getting pretty much all of them too, haven't you?
Yep, I've been in, despite my frustrations, despite 89 runs to get a Gmod and however the fuck many for all these other mounts, I am now down to just the 2 Sanctum of Domination mounts and the Tazavesh mount as well. And you ended up getting the Warglaves, and I still didn't get my Warglaves.
Warglaves and the bow, and then I already have the other. I don't need them.
So you're basically done.
Yeah, feels good, bro.
Prepped to go and do. Yeah, getting prepped to go do that mop repatch.
Yep. Well,
and mounts.
And I want to do the dark fuse rep. I want that trench coat. That trench coat is sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want that. That looks cool. But yeah, I got pretty much all my mounts. I'm a big fan of this event, man. It was a fun event.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree. I think I am still going to be running transmogs as much as possible. They did just barely start the increased leveling even more than we were already getting with Turbulent Time Wave, so definitely got to get all of my alts up. I think we're both pretty committed to eventually getting a monk up so we can go run Tazavesh and just cheese the last boss. And that's probably what we're mostly going to be doing for these next few weeks, outside of me running Sanctum. Fucking Sanctum, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad I don't have to go there.
I called both times. We were going to call for both those runs when you got the Sanctum mount off of Sylvanas and Zereth Mortis, or the jailer mount off of him. Yep.
Yeah, I remember you said, yeah, it's going to be in there. And then I looted him, and lo and behold, it was there.
It was there. But yeah, I mean, that's mostly what we've been up to these last week. We're recording on a weird day because my schedule's been weird as shit. Tim's schedule's been weird as shit. But we're here. We're ready to finish up the remainder of the Shattering novel as we move into the actual Cataclysm expansion. But first, we discussed a lot of kind of major storylines that will significantly impact the future last week, where we discussed some of Garrosh, some of Magni, some of Moira. What do you remember about last week's episode, Tim?
I remember learning about Anduin, actually finding out, okay, maybe he didn't just have a silver spoon in his hand. He did go through a little bit of strife. His teacher died that was training him, and he was in Ironforge when it happened, and then Magni turned to stone, right? And since there wasn't a leader of the dwarves anymore, basically it was up for grabs, and Moira came back. She took over Ironforge, basically took Anduin as a prisoner, and I mean, it took her rightful throne. I mean, it's in her blood, right?
Yep.
That was the big thing. There were some smaller stories with Thrall and Garrosh and some of the Tauren, I think.
Yep. We did also have Thrall realizing after a pretty intense fire in Orgrimmar that he needs to find a way to help soothe Azeroth from its elemental upheaval that it's currently going through. So he makes the decision to go out to Nagrand to speak with the Great Mother Gaia and gain some more traditional shamanistic training out there. And in the meantime, he's like, I need to leave someone in control of the Horde. And he manages to leave the fucking worst person on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Fucking give it to Gammon. Give it to anybody.
But he gave it to Garrosh.
He gives it to Garrosh Hellscream, who now had Orgrimmar rebuilt with these black steel, what is it called? Yeah, I guess black steel, instead of the typical hide skins and wood that it was previously built out of. And Cairne mentions that it looks a lot like the Hellfire Citadel out in the Hellfire Peninsula.
The Iron Horde.
And that's something that does make him uncomfortable as he prepares to, as he had already left Orgrimmar after Garrosh essentially was just like, yeah, Thrall appointed you here, but I'm not going to listen to you. So that is what happens there. We did also have, briefly at the end, Hamel Rune-Totem mentioning that he was going to speak with the Cenarian Circle about trying to come to a peace agreement with the Night Elves. And they are going to get into that this episode. But we did also have a few comments from last week. Starting off, we did have DCPTF2 saying, if you wanted to leave someone in charge of the Horde, leave it in the hands of Lothramar. The man doesn't even want to be in charge of Quel'Thalas, even though his closest allies and wife are now trying to make him king of the Blood Elves. Side note, Blizzard, you're cowards for not going through with his fated meeting with Kael'thas. Lothramar is literally the embodiment of the phrase, the ones who reject power most are the ones most worthy to wield it.
I was just going to say that. Sometimes the best leaders are people who don't want to be leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's dude, yeah, Lothramar might be a good choice, but no orc would leave the Horde in the hands of an elf. I mean, I guess Sylvanas eventually had it, right? But look how that turned out.
Yeah, and I did mention, I was like, I do think that he is definitely a more capable leader, but I also see the reasoning that Thrall would have, because we do get like this small story that bridges between the Burning Crusade and Wrath, where Lothramar doesn't want to send any troops to the Northrend campaign, and Sylvanas essentially forces him to by being like, well, if you don't, the Forsaken are going to pull out of the Ghostlands. And he's like, damn, we already barely control the Ghostlands. What do you mean? So that is the only reason the Blood Elves initially join the Northrend campaign for the Horde. So probably not earning very many brownie points among the leadership of the remaining Horde. But we did also have the Away Fan 6052 saying, I like this episode a lot. I've got some questions about these goblin hand grenades. Are they the same kind of same kind of functions like the ones we use today? Are they more like homemade explosives where it's an inconsistent fuse timer, different blast radius? Also, how many were hidden in the stockpile? If it's goblin engineers making them, I assume they're somewhat not reliable. We make ones today that can still be a dud. Much love, guys. Keep crushing it. And I mean, I would describe a lot of goblin tech is probably I think inconsistent is a good word, but it's almost like inconsistently reliable. It's like maybe it's not the same blast radius. Maybe it explodes a lot bigger, but pretty much most goblin tech works just by the sheer like MacGyvering of it.
Sometimes they backfire.
They do, but just even the fact that a lot of these things do function while seemingly being like duct taped together is kind of in its own right impressive. And that is really the biggest difference between the goblins and the gnomes. Like the goblins are basically right underneath the gnomes in terms of invention, like the ability to invent technology and stuff like that. It's just super jerry-rigged and barely functional most of the time.
Using duct tape.
Exactly. So I can assume that some of them aren't reliable, but reliable enough to get the job done, that's for sure. And thank you for the awesome comment. Lastly, we did have... I didn't even read this name. We did have Nummy Cummies over on TikTok.
Oh, Lord.
Saying, just found this account and gotta say, the short form, well-read videos are perfect. Hope you guys get a lot more attention. You deserve it. Great stuff. And thank you, Nummy Cummies. We really appreciate that, those kind words. And
what does that mean?
So much.
What? Okay, never mind.
What do you mean? It means the cummies are nummies.
You're numb? Well, never mind.
No, you're not physically numb. You numb down on them.
That's worse.
Just the silence.
That's worse.
But thank you so much for the good laugh and your amazing comment. We do appreciate it. But that is all that we did have from this last week. Now moving into the final segments of the Shattering novel. And we're just gonna jump right into it. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. So like I mentioned, last time we left off, Hamel Rune-Totem was speaking with Cairne Bloodhoof, and he was like, we're going to go meet up with the Cenarian Circle, and I'm going to see if I can broker some sort of, at least beginnings of peace talks between the Horde and the Night Elves. And Cairne gives him his blessing, and Hamel goes off to do that. And that is where we come into the story today, where Hamel Rune-Totem with 5 of these other Tauren druids are making their way over through the forests of Ashenvale, when eventually they shift out of their bear forms that they're in, and 5 of these Night Sabers come running in that transform into the Night Elf druids, and they all begin to have this meeting between Archdruid Hamel Rune-Totem and the Archdruid that leads the Night Elves by the name of Thrall. And they basically begin talking. They're like, look, we're trying to restore unity and the spiritual balance. Like, the world doesn't need to be spiraled into any further conflict. And to consecrate the moment, Hamel is like, all right. And to start off, we're going to smoke this fat doobie. And he places a peace pipe in the center of the circle. And the Night Elves, like, they know what it is. They recognize this from other times that they've had peace talks with the Taurens. And they're like, all right, cool. Well, we brought this silver goblet of purified water from the Temple of Elune. And she mentions, like, this jar that it comes from is, like, ceremonial in its own right. It's come all the way from Zenajaria all the way back in the day. They begin to drink from this cup. They begin to pack some herb into the peace pipe, getting ready to toke it up. And that's when Hamel goes to light the pipe, and he smells the smell of something familiar. Orc. And as he begins to yell out in Orcish, like, hold your ground, these arrows streak through the canopy, crashing into the Night Elves. And 2 of them immediately die as this warband of orcs comes crashing into the grove and just begins ripping into these Night Elves. And Hamel will transform back into a bear. He'll begin, like, stepping on some of these orcs and whatnot, trying to prevent this from breaking out into any further bloodshed, but the grove becomes just this killing field, a massacre, basically. And eventually all of the Kaldori are dead, and these orcs begin to try and attack Hamel and the Tauren, and they're like, wait, this guy's a Tauren. And as the orc says that, he's like, yes, we are. He transforms back into his regular form, and he looks and he sees the peace pipe crushed into the mud, and he sees the jar shattered into pieces. And he basically confronts the orcs. He's like, who the fuck are you guys? Why the fuck would you do that? We were beginning peace talks under the orders of Cairne Bloodhoof. And the orcs are just like, we saw 5 Night Sabers, and we thought that they would be attacking Orgrimmar. And Hamel is just like, you thought 5 fucking Night Sabers were going to attack Orgrimmar? Like, have you been smoking already? And this orc leader named Gorkrak is just like neglectful of the situation. And Hamel eventually is just like, did Garrosh approve of this? And the orc says, I don't know who Garrosh is. And Hamel basically says, I'm going to take this to Cairne Bloodhoof, and I promise you that your days of progressing through the Horde are over. And upon hearing this, Gorak's face twists into this cruel grin as he looks behind Hamel, and Hamel realizes what's about to happen just before it does, and quickly transforms into his bear form before he is also peppered with arrows. And I will mention, we do kind of get a slight perspective of this orc, and we do realize that these are not orcs led by Garrosh Hellscream. These are Twilight's Hammer, who we mentioned way back in episode 3 or something like that, are the cult of the Twilight Hammer. They are essentially the followers of Cho'Gall, who believe in bringing on this hour of twilight, this end of existence to all worlds. So they kill all of the druids, all of the Taurens, all of the Night Elves, killed all the same. And then they just quickly gather up all their bodies and toss them into a mass grave and lightly bury it.
This drugs they were smoking, like, out of body experience? Is it just like some chill, like, marijuana? Like, what are we working with?
I imagine, but it is just something like the ganja. I mean, that's at least how I was imagining it while I was listening to the audiobook. I was like, smoking on that good. That medical grade. Maybe Garrosh could use some of that. But that is where Hamel eventually wakes up. And he is like, wait, am I awake? As he opens his eyes and he can't see anything. And he feels pressure on all sides of his body. And he realizes that, well, he's in a mass grave surrounded by dirt and the corpses of his allies. And he eventually pushes his way out of this mass grave. And he's super exhausted and still on the brink of death. And he is basically like, I need to get a message to Cairne. And that's when he kind of calls upon the spirits of the wilds. And this white owl descends silently from the trees, landing right in front of him. And he begins to scrawl out this desperate message in his own blood and ties it to the owl's leg and tells him, go to Cairne Bloodhoof. And the owl flies away to go tell Cairne exactly what he had just seen. And that's where we cut to Grommash, the main building within Orgrimmar, where Garrosh Hellscream lies prone, his jaw clenched and his fist tight as this ritual tattooing ceremony is going on, where this other orc is literally like, if you've seen like the traditional way that they do like Polynesian or like Islander tattoos. That's what's going on. Literally like hammer and chiseling with ink, his jaw completely black. And he is doing this in tribute to his father, who also had this tattoo on his jaw. And this is where we kind of get the info that Garrosh is a fucking sadist, because he's like, oh, it hurts so bad. And he's like, but I love it. Like, makes sense why he ends up where he does in the afterlife, if you ask me.
Okay. Getting a little insight on the Garrosh.
He's like, suffering is the language of strength. I want my enemies to see me and know that I inflicted pain on myself. And I'm like, what the fuck, Garrosh?
Does he do this? Is this the only time he really does this? I don't remember this. Him being like
he
this.
Gets his chest done too. Oh,
but being like a sadist. Yeah.
Sadist, masochist. I think he's all of them at once somehow, some way. But yeah, I don't think we really get the inclination in game where he's like, yeah, just step on my balls. No.
Right.
But that is where Cairne Bloodhoof bursts into the doors, calling for Garrosh Hellscream, and he roars it out. And as he begins to make his way past the Corcoran guards, he's like, I demand to see the Warchief. And one of the Corcoran's like, no one demands to see the Warchief of the Horde. And he's like, shut your bitch ass up. I built the Horde. And that is where Garrosh comes up to approach him, stunned and outraged, as Cairne then accuses him, and he says, I know that you led the incursion into Ashenvale. I know that you had the druids killed. And Garrosh literally is just like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. He seems just as shocked, like we kind of mentioned. But Cairne's like, yeah, I don't trust you. And honestly, I thought that maybe one day you'd be fit for the role of Warchief, but now I see that you are not even fit to govern a pack of dogs. And Garrosh is just like, oh yeah, you want to fucking go? And Cairne literally pimp slaps him across the face to the floor. As blood begins to trickle down his freshly tattooed jaw, Garrosh immediately rushes to his feet and he says, so you're challenging me then? And Cairne says, yes, I do challenge you, Garrosh. I challenge you to Mak'gora. And just a reminder, I think it's been a while since we've had a Mak'gora. The last one was probably Orgrimmar and Blackhand. But Mak'gora is a one-on-one duel with these pre-established rules of combat, basically. Like, I will mention, magic can be used, but as long as it's agreed upon beforehand. And typically, orcs are like martial warriors. They don't tend to use magic. So that is the rules of Mak'gora for the most part. But then Garrosh is like, oh yeah, but that tradition's kind of just become a joke ever since Thrall took over, because he removed the rules where you have to kill each other. And Garrosh is like, I'll face you in Mak'gora if you agree to the old rules. And Cairne's like, I'd hope to just teach you a lesson, but if that's what you want, Garrosh, we'll do it. And then he asks him, he's like, since we're doing the old rules, like, what's the clothing? What's the weapons? What are any other, like, how many witnesses are we going to have? And Garrosh kind of just stares at him blankly. And Cairne laughs. He's like, how do I know more about your ancient traditions than you do? And with this, they do set the rules. Battle to the death, no armor, just a loincloth, a single weapon, and you may have that weapon blessed by a shaman before the battle. And they agree to this, and he's like, all right, meet me in the Orgrimmar arena in 1 hour. Cairne's like, I'll be there, big dog. And yeah, that is where 1 hour later, we jump to the Orgrimmar arena, where there are definitely more than a single witness, as the entire arena is completely filled, basically split in half, with the more elder Tauren standing on one side, and the orcs and the trolls and the other major, tend to be younger portions of the Horde are cheering for Garrosh. And the air is heavy as the duel gets prepared to begin, and Cairne grabs his family's rune spear that he has historically used. It has all of his family's history carved into the hilt of this weapon as well, and he has it blessed by his shaman, Barum Skychaser. And he looks over, and unfortunately, the truth is, Cairne's getting pretty old, because he does look over, and he sees that somebody is blessing Garrosh's weapon, but his eyes don't really see that far very well anymore. So he's like, it's definitely a large black figure. I think it's a Tauren. And that's when he puts it together. He's like, Magatha Grimtotem. And Magatha Grimtotem is the one blessing Garrosh's weapon. And with both their weapons blessed in front of the crowd, the battle begins. And Cairne stands on one side of the arena, calm as hell. Garrosh getting all hyped up, and Cairne he basically taunts him. He's like, I'm gonna remain I'm gonna remain poised, and I'm just gonna let him come to me. And it works. He's just like, Garrosh, your breath stinks. And Garrosh is like, no, and comes running with Gorehowl in hand, swinging it over his head as Cairne just steps out of the way of this initial swing, stabbing him directly in the shoulder with his rune spear and drawing the blade out as Garrosh goes for another swing on him with another reckless arc. Cairne once again stabs him in the bicep of his arm. He's barely able to hold up Gorehowl at this point, and he is literally just thinking to himself, he's like, I didn't want it to be like this, but you've given me no choice, Garrosh. And that is when, astonishingly, Cairne sees him lift Gorehowl with one hand. We have to remind yourself, Gorehowl's a two-handed axe, and the thing's fucking huge. So it even surprises Cairne that he's able to swing this axe with one hand, and Cairne, slightly surprised, holds up his rune spear to block the attack as the axe shatters through the hilt of his rune spear, and barely, though most of the damage is deflected through the shattering of the spear, it does leave a slight groove on the chest of Cairne, who is slightly wounded by this. But with this, he's clutching the jagged shaft of his broken weapon, and he's like, it's fine. Like, this is still enough to take him down. As he gets ready to land the killing blow on Garrosh, he feels his legs buckle. His vision gets all blurry, and he gets dizzy, and he realizes this is not fatigue. This is not age. And he realizes this is poison, as he realizes that Magatha likely placed a toxin upon Gorehowl that leaves him basically paralyzed. He falls to 1 foot, but he does mentally think to himself, I refuse to die, not on my feet. And Garrosh, seeing the broken spear, the wounded Cairne, doesn't even think twice about it, rushes forward and drives Gorehowl into the shoulder and neck of Cairne Bloodhoof as he falls to the ground, dying.
So is her putting a poison on it? I mean, they said let a shaman bless it. Was that legal?
It's definitely not allowed. That's definitely not legal. Yeah, some weighted gloves type shit.
So if that weapon wasn't poison, you think Cairne had it in the bag?
I do. I mean, I think that it at least the battle leading up to it, like, he does get slightly injured. Obviously, he does have the weapon break, but I still think that Cairne would have beaten Garrosh just because he can remain level-headed. He has more experience overall in combat than Garrosh does. And yeah, I mean, I think we see it a lot, but Garrosh's biggest downfall is his pride, his ego, his willingness to jump into things, maybe not always with the most sound reasoning or preparedness.
Maybe, but his age is getting to him, and he can't even see 10 feet in front of him.
Yeah, but it's like muscle memory. I mean, he definitely could lose. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. But this does become a major point throughout the story. And I mean, it's something that I'm curious if you guys think too. Like, do you guys think that Garrosh would have still beaten Cairne without the poison? Or do you think that Cairne, wisdom and is many decades being older than Garrosh? I think I looked it up on the wiki. Cairne lived to like 108 years old. He'd been around.
Well, is that a Tauren just thing? They live for a while?
I'm sure that they do, but even still, like, he was an elder amongst his people for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, Cairne's body hits the floor and kicks up a cloud of dust as a hush falls over Orgrimmar, and Garrosh stands victorious and holds up Gorehowl, letting out this bestial roar. And the Tauren fall completely silent as a lot of them are kind of shocked. They're like, how did Cairne go down? Like, that wasn't even like a deadly wound. And rumors begin to spread through the crowd of maybe it wasn't a fair fight. And watching from the stands of the stadium is Magatha Grimtotem herself. And she's basically just like, no one thought this fight would be this easy, except for me, who poisoned the weapon. And immediately upon this happening, she then sends out a message to Thunder Bluff being like, it's time. And with that, there is this uprising where the Grimtotem, who have been waiting silently for years amongst the Tauren, prepare to take Thunder Bluff. And Upon receiving the message, all of these Grimtotem that have been in position for many years then strike. They assassinate political leaders, they assassinate shamans, they assassinate warriors, anybody who they can. In the middle of the night, they go and they slay them in their sleep. And it is just a massacre from Thunder Bluff to a bunch of the nearby villages, even all the way over in the Sunstriders Retreat. They have this uprising of Grimtotem that begin just slaughtering all of the people that could present a threat to Magatha's rule, and even just killing innocent people who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They say literally, like, after all the major targets are dead, they just begin targeting anyone that would spread fear. And yeah, with that being the case, there is also this group of assassins that begin making their way to the Bloodhoof village, which is this small village in the plains of Mak'gora established by Cairne for his family and his people. And it's currently where his son is at, Baine Bloodhoof, who is, I think, initially sleeping as this goes off. And there's this figure, this Grimtotem, who's leading this squad of like 14 of these Grimtotem to go ambush and kill him. And he's like, he tells his group it's this Grimtotem by the name of Stormsong, and he is a shaman of his own people as well. And he tells his group, he's like, I think that they might have gotten a message to Baine. He would have been the first to be let know. So I'm going to go scout, and I'm going to make sure that they don't know we're coming, and just to make sure that we don't get ambushed ourselves as we make our way in there. And they're like, all right, we'll wait here. So he goes in, and he folds. He's like, hey, Baine, yeah, they're coming to assassinate you. I always had respect for your father, so I'm not really with this fuck shit, but there are literally like 24 dudes outside right now preparing to fight with you. You need to run. And Baine's just like, he also tells him like, oh yeah, and your dad's dead. He was betrayed by Magatha over and Orgrimmar. And he's just like, there's no fucking way. And he hands him a fragment of the shattered rune spear, and upon holding it in his hand, he's like, there's no mistake. Like, I've seen this spear a bazillion times. There's no question about it. My father was slain, and what he's saying is true. And he's like, well, what do we do? And he's like, you got to get out of here. Like, you're so outnumbered, we have to leave. And he's like, I won't run. And he's like, then you're just going to die too. Like, who will avenge your father's legacy if you just die here? And Baine makes the uncomfortable decision, agreeing with him, like, yeah, I guess you're right. So he flees out of the Bloodhoof village as his braves, which are the elite guards. The Grimtotem then make their way into the camp. They're like, our other guy got captured or something. It's taking him too long. We're just going to go in there. So they begin fighting with these braves, and they're like, wait, where's Baine? And they see him booking it off in the distance, and they're like, get his ass. But then they realize, oh shit, he set off this stampede of Kodos. He basically spooked all the Kodos that were nearby, which are, these massive beasts of burden, basically like rhinos. And they're now stampeding towards the Grimtotem. So the Grimtotem are like, oh shit, we got to get out of here. So they begin bolting away from the Kodos as they dive into this lake to get away from the Kodos. Some of their men drown. Some of them didn't even make it that far and got turned to a paste underneath Kodofoot. And they realize that they will be failing their mission, and that Baine Bloodhoof will survive as he rides off into the night on Kodoback as well, making his way to where he believes is one of the last areas of shelter for his people, the Camp Tarajo.
What's her end goal? Like, she wanted Cairne dead so she could like have rule of Thunder Bluff, or?
Yep, exactly that.
Okay.
Like, she's kind of generic bad guy, but they always describe the Grimtotems as like schemers and stuff like that. But yeah, Magatha Grimtotem now rules over. Oh, I should mention, as he makes his way to Camp Tarajo, Baine enters the room, and he is pleasantly surprised to find a Hamel Rune Totem, wounded but alive, there with him, along with the traitor of the Grimtotem, Stormsong. And they all share their stories about what they know about the situation as they begin to try and prepare for taking on Magatha Grimtotem's now rule over Thunder Bluff, where she is just like, Baine may have got away, but, you know, even if they come for me, like, I hold Thunder Bluff, it's going to be hard as hell for them to take it. Like, even if they do rally behind him, like, good luck. And that's basically where her mindset is at. And that is where we cut over to Nagrand, where Thrall sits beside the Great Mother Gaia. And he's, like, going through this inner conflict where he's like, I've been trying to learn about how to control the elements here, but basically all I've been doing is forced to fight with these elemental spirits that were so broken here on Outland. And he begins to be washed over with doubt that he'll even be capable of saving Azeroth. And that is where eventually Guy is like, have you ever had a spirit journey? And he's like, he thinks back to when he trained with Drekthar, and he's like, well, I mean, I kind of spoke with the elements when I first started doing this, but even Guy is like, yeah, and I'm sure Drekthar did his best, but it was probably a pretty rudimentary ritual compared to what we do out here. And to take on this vision quest will give you a better understanding of being a shaman and yourself. And with this, she's like, all right, Agra, prepare him for his spirit journey or his vision quest. And she's like, all right, fucker, come on, let's go. And it says after 3 days, they finally prepare everything that they need for this ritual. And Agra is dressed in these ritualistic clothing, and they're like, you're going to be reborn in this situation, Thrall, so you need to take that armor off. Our initiates don't wear armor. Here, wear these generic robes. And he's like, okay. And she's like, and take these massive prayer beads, and she drapes them over his neck and begins to paint his skin with the markings of the orcs. And she basically tells him, she's like, you have to know yourself before you can carry the weight of others. And that is what this ritual will teach you. So as he lays down on his, and he thinks about that to himself, and he's like, all right, let's do this. We'll get back to him, because over in the snow-covered peaks of Khazad-dûm, you got Prince Anduin Wrynn, right? He's still being held captive in Ironforge by Moira, and as he ponders, like, the whole situation that's been going on, he is given this invitation to come to dinner with Moira, and while it's not really an invitation, it's more like, you're coming to dinner, it does also say you need to wear your personal best, like dress as formally as you can. And Anduin sees this as an opportunity to play the political game. He's like, she invited me this way, and I'm sure that she thinks that, like, having me at the foot of her table is gonna, assert dominance over me. But I'm gonna pull up, I'm gonna wear my full Stormwind outfit, I got my crown on, I am ready for this. So he gets all dressed up nice and fancy as he makes his way over to dinner, where he is then forced to wait for several minutes before Moira enters the room, and Anduin knows that this is intentional. Again, another power play over him. And he just kind of plays dumb. He plays really, like, into her ego and plays really up to her plight, as he then sits down at the table, and Moira begins talking with him, and she's like, I hear that your father and you kind of have grown apart a lot recently. And he's like, yeah, like, I don't necessarily live up to what my father expected in a son. And he uses this moment to jab at her, and he basically goes, I hear that's something that you can relate to. And it's the first time that, like, her facade cracks as she flinches, and she then says, in this, like, unexpected vulnerability, that Magni only ever dismissed her and her ideas because she was a woman. And she mentions the only reason that he thought that Dagran, like, magically enchanted me to get me to stay with the Black Irons is because he doesn't understand that Dagran just treated me with respect and encouraged, like, me to be able to lead people and encouraged people to listen to me when I spoke. That's the only enchantment that they put over me. And Anduin, like, nods at it as her tone changes back, and she kind of calms down a bit again, as she then is like, but I'm not just a queen, I'm an empress. As Anduin senses a bit of danger lurking behind her idealism of forging this unity, this peace among all the Dwarven clans, and he feels a chill go over his spine as she says it. And Anduin then realizes, yeah, I gotta get the fuck out of here. So after his dinner, he heads back to his room, and he makes the decision, yep, I'm not going to remain a pawn here. I am just going to grab this sacred relic that Magni gave me in his last day here, Fearbreaker, that mace that we spoke about, and I'm going to grab this hearthstone that I hid away underneath my bed, and I'm going to just get out of here. And he does. He grips onto the hearthstone, gifted to him by Jaina Proudmoore, and concentrates on the safety of Theramore as he vanishes from Ironforge, appearing in Theramore, where he sees Jaina Proudmoore standing in front of a heavily armored Tauren. And before any misunderstandings can break down, she quickly like outstretches an arm to both Baine Bloodhoof and Anduin Wrynn, being like, I gave him a gift. I didn't know that he was going to appear here. And the tension does ease a little bit as Baine and Anduin are like, Anduin Wrynn, Baine Bloodhoof? And they shake hands or whatever. And they begin to discuss what has been going on in both their lives. As Baine tells Jaina and Anduin, yep, Thunder Bluff's been taken by the Grimtotems. They killed my father. Shit's been thick. And Anduin's like, yep, I got held as a political hostage over in Ironforge. Moira seems to be enforcing her rule through brutality. Shit's getting thick.
Just both sides are having it rough right now. Both Horde and Alliance.
Well, and they
catch a break.
They do have this really cool conversation, I think, where they discuss with each other, like, because initially they're kind of standoffish. She's like, your father hates the Horde. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not my father. And he's like, and you understand that in this moment better than anybody, because I can see the doubt of you of you doubting your ability to lead the Tauren people now that you are going to be High Chieftain. And they kind of relate over this in a way where they come to an understanding of each other's situation to a much deeper level. And over in Ironforge, Moira hears about Anduin escaping, and she's like, how the fuck did you let the only fucking 5'3" blonde-haired white boy leave the goddamn capital? And they're like, we don't know, maybe he teleported out. And they're like, we have wards against that, like, don't be fucking stupid to me. Have you been drinking on the job? And he's like, I don't drink on the job. You're being mean. But she basically is just like, all right, I'm just gonna continue to push the illusion to the rest of the world that nothing has changed, and that I will reveal my agenda in my own time, as she doesn't want to have this, I guess, chaos of people knowing that her political prisoner escaped. And that is where we do get this brief intermission where Palkar returns to Drekthar at this lonely campfire as this bloodied Tauren courier arrives to speak with both him and Drekthar. And this long walker goes in, and he's like, Cairne Bloodhoof is dead. He was basically cheated in Mak'gora by Magatha Grimtotem, and they used Garrosh Hellscream to do it. And they sit in stunned silence as he then tells him, like, oh yeah, and there was this massacre over in Ashenvale where a bunch of our druids were killed in this massacre. And it's when Pelkar remembers. He's like, weeks ago, Drekthar told me that our people were in danger over in Ashenvale. And it kind of begins to link the chains together where he's like, he wasn't wrong. He was just like way early on his prediction. And he begins to realize Drekthar's not crazy. Drekthar is literally beginning to predict the end of the world. And his brain then goes to the next thing that Drekthar had told him, that the land will weep and the world will break.
I wonder what that means.
Could mean any number of things.
Uh-huh.
I guess we'll find out. Cutting back to Thrall in the village of Garadar, which, fun fact, Garadar is named after Thrall's grandfather, Garad. Just, fun little fact that they do mention in the book. I'm like, I guess I never realized that. Yeah, that makes sense. Thrall begins to enter into this spirit realm, where before him he sees this spirit wolf that he's certain is Agra, and his form is also like a spirit wolf. And they begin to walk through this, like, kind of, just like ephemeral void until these visions begin to appear to him. And the first vision that Thrall is given, he sees the arena at Durnhold Keep when he was a young man, and he sees himself down in this arena fighting with this passionate fury. And Agra begins to tell him, she's like, this is where the fire entered you, the element of fire, where you gained the will to fight and the courage to rise. And he begins to understand, like, I became a shaman later in my life, but the elements have been imbued within me for long before that. As he then moves on from that vision, they continue making their way, and eventually they come across a quiet forest with this dark cave. And inside this dark cave, he sees Thrall speaking with Taretha Foxton. And she weeps as she begins to prepare him to run off and go found the Horde, essentially. And he feels that gentle, undeniable love that Taretha had for him. And Agra says, this is where you found love, grief, tears that you carry still. And Thrall stands in silence as he remembers. He's like, yeah, Taretha's death was something that had always haunted me. And he's like, but perhaps her death was not meaningless. Like, perhaps this moment was what, like she should have said, gave me this element of water. In that moment, he's like, even though he didn't want to initially see Taretha again because of the memories that it brought up, as that vision begins to vanish, he does mention, he's like, though I wish now that I could stay here just a little bit longer. And that's when he comes to another vision beneath this gray sky blanketed in snow, where he stands behind Drekthar, his mentor, teaching him the ways of the shaman. And Agra tells him, this is Earth. This is where you became grounded, centered, as wisdom passed from one generation to the next. That is Earth. And where Thrall then realizes that he found his foundation as the man that he would become, the roots that had guided him to who he would be. And lastly, the mist swirls once again, revealing a council room where he sees himself speaking with Cairne, and it shifts, and then he sees himself speaking with Jaina and going through these peace talks and this diplomacy. And Agra says, this is air, this is insight, thought, connection over conquest. And this is what gave you the value over strength, clarity over wrath. And that is where he is given his final vision. As the four elements fade, he just sees himself in Doomhammer's black armor with a face of dread, and the image cracks and shatters before him as he snaps awake, screaming no, and looks to the Great Mother Gaia, and he's like, I'm gonna fail. I'm going to fail. And then Agra comes over to him, and she's like, it's only a vision, and it's not fate yet. And he is shaken, but she's like, you saw what you needed to see to become the better man for tomorrow. And Thrall's like, tomorrow then. And that's where the next morning, Thrall and Agra make their way over to the Throne of Elements, where he then is standing before the four elemental lords of Outland. And she basically is like, all right, you've passed your initiate test. It's time to talk to the Furies about if they can help you to prepare for, everything that's going on Azeroth. And he's like, all right. So initially he approaches Calandrios, who is the Fury of Air, this wind elemental that's massive with these glowing eyes. And Thrall reaches out and he's like, hey, my world's getting fucked up. Do you think you can give me the clarity about what to do? And the Fury just kind of looks at him and it's like, why the fuck do I care about another planet? Like, this world's already fucked up and I got a lot to worry about. Get out my face. And Thrall's like, well, that was a bust. What the fuck? But he does come to this understanding. He's like, but I do think that if the wind had been able to help me, that it would have. It just can't. So next he approaches Incinerus, the Fury of Fire, as he calms himself and he stills his breath, centering his thoughts. He enters this mental space that is just burning with flame, and it's so intense that he can feel it burning in his chest. He can't even look at it from how intense the heat is. And he speaks with him and he's like, I need your understanding, your blessing to help me to fix my world. And Incinerus is like, I don't necessarily know how to fix your world, but I can give you this gift. And it basically is just described that Incinerus blesses Thrall with the gift of fire. And it's something that even Agra's eyes widen, because even she, when she had done this ritual, was not given the gift of fire. So she's like, that's super rare. Like, that's a good sign at least. And he's like, I don't think it was for me. I think it's to take back to my world to help the elements over there. And then he approaches Aborius, the Fury of Water, and this gentle soothing comes over him. And she offers no magical power or spectacle, and she just urges Thrall, don't hide from your pain. You need to feel it fully, and you need to understand what kindness came from the sacrifices that you've been through. As his face wells with tears and he thinks back to Taretha, they begin rolling over him. And Aborius says, tears are not weakness. They are what nourish the earth. And in that moment, Thrall realizes that his sorrow is not a flaw, but it's what makes healing possible. But he's like, all right, this is great and all, but what about Azeroth? And that's when he approaches Gordog, the final Fury, the Fury of Earth. And he speaks with Gordog, and he's like, hey, my planet, it is just all sorts of fucked up. Is there any way that you could tell me what's possibly wrong with it? And Gordog's like, I mean, I can eat dirt. and understand it on a deeper emotional level, which sounds fucking hilarious in retrospect, but is actually true. Like, he literally scoops up a pile of dirt and he's like, I can taste the generations that have passed over this soil. And Thrall's like, ooh, actually, I have an idea. I usually keep like this little shaman kit on me that has like a bowl of water and like a feather to represent air, and I brought a rock from Azeroth. Eat this. And Gordog's like, all right, cool. He eats it and he's like, ugh, that tastes like shit. And he says, no, this is not the way of the earth. This was of the world, and it's now unnatural and dark, much like what is causing this. And he says, he basically describes it like something that disturbs him. He's like, this is something that was pure and is now completely twisted. And he says, the rocks are afraid. They fear being broken. They fear shattering. And that is when Thrall is like, okay, I guess I should get back to Azeroth then and see why the rocks are so damn afraid. And he tells Agra, he's like, I need to find out what the elements are fearing, and I must stop it. And I have to go back to Azeroth to do that. And she's like, all right, cool. Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. You have Garrosh Hellscream standing alone in this arena, like hours, or as dawn breaks over Durotar, and he stares at the bloodstain where Cairne Bloodhoof had laid, as Gorhal hangs in his grip, and he's just like this sense of unease. He's like, I don't know why I feel so uneasy. He's like, I didn't hate Cairne. Like, the truth is, I did not hate Cairne, but he challenged me, and I needed to stand up for my honor. So he feels very conflicted as he stares at this bloodstain. And that's when Eitrig approaches him from behind and says, he died too quickly, too easily. As Garrosh snaps around and he's like, well, he was old. He couldn't hang with me. Like, I'm too good. And Eitrig's like, yo, yeah? Like, really? It didn't make you at all surprised that little baby wound that you struck on him suddenly made him collapse? And then Eitrig asks him, he's like, who blessed your weapon? And Garrosh is like, Magatha Grimtotem did. And that's when they look over Gorhal that hasn't had the oil wiped off of yet, and they see this black liquid that is like residue on the blade. And that's when Garrosh realizes, he's like, typically the ceremonial oils that they would use for these shine with gold. And he's like, she poisoned my weapon. And the truth hits him, and he's like, she used me. She robbed my honor and used me as a weapon against her enemies without my knowing. She made me a fool. And with that, he's like, there will be no redemption. The long road of consequence will continue forth from here.
I thought he was down with it. I thought he knew.
He did not know. He's actually quite upset by the fact because, he's all about honor, and he basically has other people whispering that he cheated now, and it does not look good on him. But as night falls over in Theramore, you have Jaina, Anduin, and Baine all sitting together as they're drinking from these cups and beginning to recount everything that's happened and what their next plan of attack is. As eventually Anduin is like, hey, Jaina, do you still have that magic mirror from the Shrek movie so I can talk to my dad? And Jaina's like, yeah, I got you. So she goes over to this magic mirror. She recites a spell. And she's like, Varian Wrynn, ding, ding, ding. And eventually Varian's face appears on this mirror. And he sees Anduin and he's like, oh, thank God. I'm so happy that you're okay. He's like, yeah, I'm okay. Moira is kind of crazy, but the people of Ironforge say that she's within her rights to rule Ironforge. So I had to get out of there before I, was made any more of a political hostage. And he's like, all right, well, this is good to know. We will continue presenting ourselves as if we think that you're a hostage over there and let her play her games as we prepare for our next steps as well. And the next day, Baine requests another meeting with all three of them as they sit together and they speak as they have grown even more of a friendship. And he kind of discusses, he's like, so are you going to kill all the Grimtotems? And Baine's like, my heart says that they took from me and I should take from them. But then he's like, truthfully, it's not what my father taught me, and it's not what he would have wanted. And I'm trying to be worthy of him, not just give in to my emotions. And Anduin is just like, then let your heart speak louder than your pain. That's how peace can begin. you know, seeing all this, knowing this story really does give a lot more value to everything that happens between Baine and Jaina and all of them back in BFA and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool.
Is Garrosh honorable?
I mean, at least kind of for now.
I guess.
But over in Thunder Bluff, Magatha Grimtotem sits on Cairne's throne as she thinks about everything that's been going on. She thinks about how her tribe was raised to be warriors. From the second that they're able to hold a weapon, they are basically taught to kill each other. And she thinks about all of the Tauren that she slayed, and she's like, maybe I was wrong. And she's like, nah, terror's what breeds loyalty. Okay, that's a fucking dipshit take, but all right. And she begins to think about, oh yeah, I am hearing whispers of rebellion from people in Feralis and the Moonglade and Camp Mohaji, of all these people that say that Baine Bloodhoof was chosen by the Earth Mother and that they're going to reclaim Thunder Bluff. So the first thing that she does is she has them bring as much supplies to Thunder Bluff as they can to prepare for a long siege. And, like, even if he does come, there's no way that he's getting all the way up here, and we're going to plant some bombs on the lifts that get up to Thunder Bluff, and if they come, we'll just blow them up, and then they'll have a really shit time trying to get into here. And she then also sends this message over to Garrosh Hellscream, being like, oh, like, you're the greatest, Garrosh, like, I'm the new leader of the Tauren people, and we can be the best friends, and I want your orcish babies. I don't know. It just says that she fills it with flattery of loyalty and leverage. And that is eventually a few days later where this lone orc courier arrives. And Magatha's like, what, do you have a message from Garrosh? And he's like, yes, here. And she's like, read it out. And it's like, initially is just like I'm so happy to hear about your succession, Elder Crone Magatha of the Grimtotem, and it is Garrosh's best wishes and his most sincere desire for you to experience a slow and painful death. And the room falls into silence as Magatha is like reads the rest of it with fury, and in an outlash of rage, she explodes, sending a lightning bolt, because she's a shaman too, a lightning bolt down that strikes and kills this lone orc courier. Talk about shooting the messenger, right? As his body is then dragged away.
I was going to say, does flesh melt off and it was just his boots left?
He's just a skeleton for a second, like in cartoons. Yeah. No, they do mention that it smells like burning flesh, though.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. But that is where we cut to the sun-bleached alleys of Ratchet, which is this small goblin town, I guess you would call it, a goblin town on the edge of what is known as the Barrens, right outside of Orgrimmar, led by the man who originally built Orgrimmar, Gazlo. And he's having a meeting with this Grimtotem. And the Grimtotem provides him with a list. He's like, we need all of this. And Gazlo like looks over the list and he's like, you need how many bombs? Like, I thought that you accidentally put 2 zeros on here. And they're like, no, we need that many bombs. And Gazlo is like, you know, this is going to take a lot of money. And the Grimtotem presents him with a large sack of money. And he's like, now we're talking. And the Grimtotem's like, and we also need it like in like a few days. And Gazlo's like, I don't know if I can make that work. And he's like, they then produces another massive bag of gold and sets it on the table. And he's like, I understand that it will cost a little extra to get it done so quickly. And as Gazlo looks over the money and counts it, he's like, yeah, I think I can make it work. And that is when he does something that I actually think is a really cool touch to this story. He takes only a handful of gold out of the second bag and pushes it back to the Tauren and says, you know, I support your guys' cause. And I essentially, this Grimtotem thinks, he's like, that's the closest thing that you could come to like getting support from a goblin, is them not accepting the full amount of payment. As Gazlo then says, tell Baine that I always liked his dad. And it reveals to everybody that this Grimtotem is Stormsong, the Grimtotem that defected. It was just a really cool scene to read, how it read, because initially you're like, dang, like the Grimtotems are going to be so stacked, and then you're like, oh, fuck, it's Baine. Baine's getting all the bombs. But that is where Baine's march begins. He, leading all of these loyal Tauren over to begin to make their way to Thunder Bluff, he has been given the mace Fearbreaker by Anduin, who mentioned as he was leaving Theramore, he was like, I think that Magni gave me this weapon so that I could give it to you eventually. And Baine's just like, thank you, Anduin Wrynn. I really appreciate this gesture. And Anduin's like, no problem, big dog. Always looking out for the fam. So now Baine is the wielder of the mace, Fearbreaker, originally created by the dwarves. Passed to Anduin, now passed to the Tauren people. And as he begins to make his way, the mace Fearbreaker is glowing with this quiet radiance and confidence as he then rallies more and more people to his side. He gets the Darkspear trolls to join up with him. He gets Orcish warriors that were disillusioned with Garrosh's rule. He even gets a few Forsaken to join up with his rebellion against Magatha Grimtotem. And he also spends what more money he has on these mercenaries to prepare to go and take Thunder Bluff. And that is when, in Thunder Bluff, you have Magatha, who's been hearing about all this going on, preparing her defenses, sealing off the mesas and portals, and amassing as much supplies as we can, like we mentioned. And she prepares for war, essentially. And as it's the middle of the night, this storm rolls over Mak'gora, and it's just the loudest thunderstorm that she's ever heard. Like, it thunders so loud that it shocks her awake, and she then heads outside looking around, and she does see a massive storm, and she is just like, initially like, oh, just a crazy storm, that's all. But then she's like, what the fuck is that? And she looks, and coming through the storm clouds are goblin zeppelins, and they have the banners of the Darkspear trolls and Baine's rebels and all these mercenaries hanging from them as they begin to make their way flying over to Thunder Bluff. And just as soon as she spots them, these rope ladders come swinging down as a bunch of the units just begin to pour into Thunder Bluff to face off against the Grimtotem. And I mean, yeah, like, she does summon, like, some lightning. She knocks one of these zeppelins out of the air, but there are still more, and they're dropping bombs down. I mean, they literally describe it as, like, Saving Private Ryan, where it's just, like, limbs and shit are going flying from these bombs being dropped. And as all these buildings begin to burn and these bombs that are tearing through the stonework, these wyverns begin to scramble and go and fight with them in the skies as the next portion of Baine's plan comes into action, where he sent troll rogues into the city, and instead of having them do what the Grimtotem did of assassinate all of their enemies, basically, he has them go and cut the bridges between each of the places where the buildings of Thunder Bluff are actually connected, these massive rope bridges, so that everyone who's fighting in whatever area is basically forced to be stuck there. And as this is happening, Magatha is just like, blow the lifts, and she hears one of them explode, and then she expects to hear the rest of them explode, and she realizes, those fucking rogues disarmed my bombs too, the bastards. And that is when, hopping down from one of the zeppelins before her, appears Baine Bloodhoof, Fearbreaker in hand, as she freezes, realizing that there is no escape. He runs over, she goes to grab one of her totems to call upon a shamanistic spell, and Baine just knocks her fucking flat with one swing, and he holds it up to her, and he says, yield. And then she stutters for a second before saying, I yield. And Baine is just like, good. And then he punches her unconscious.
He leaves her alive?
Yep. As smoke begins to linger over all these mesas, this battle has ended, and Magatha is all bloodied and in chains before Baine, and all of these other Grimtotems are with him. And he's to Magatha, he's like, you like comfort and you like power, and I will let you live, but you're going to taste neither of them. So he smashes all of her totems into pieces, and he's like, and you're exiled. You can never return to the lands of the Tauren ever again. And you have no title, you have no safety, and you have no magic with you. And then he looks to the rest of the Grimtotem, and he's like, though I'm not going to demand submission through fear like she did. If you want, you have the option to come and denounce Magatha in front of me and swear loyalty to the rest of the Tauren people, or you will be following her in exile. And that's where, like, 25% of these Grimtotem fall before Baine, pleading, like, I have a family here, like, please, we don't want to die, we can't make it out there. And Baine does exactly what he says. He's like, all right, for that, you will be watched for a time being, but we will integrate you back into Tauren society. The rest of you that are confident in following Magatha, get the fuck out. And then a few days later, in the shadowed spires of Thousand Needles, Baine meets with Garrosh Hellscream. And Garrosh approaches him, and Baine's like, you robbed me of more time with my father. And Garrosh says, he's like, I didn't poison the blade, and I didn't want it to end like that, but I do understand your anger. And Garrosh is like, so I assume that you will also be challenging me in Mak'gora, like the sins of the father, I think is something like he says, right? And Baine's like, no, like, I know that you're not the true murderer. That was Magatha. I'm not going to challenge you, Warchief, not because I forgive you, but because there is a war to stop, and the true killer of Magatha has already been judged. And they basically like look each other in the eye, and he's like, this is an alliance made out of necessity, not necessarily friendship, as they look each other in the eye. And Baine says, for the Horde. And Garrosh responds, shaking his hand, for the Horde. And that's back in Theramore, where this thunder rattles so loudly that it wakes Anduin. As he comes rushing out of his room, he sees Jaina beginning to like lead people, and he's like, what's going on? And Jaina's like, Theramore's literally flooding. And he's like, oh shit. And initially she's like, you should stay there. And he's like, nah, I'm gonna go help, you know me. So they go, and they begin helping the city of Theramore as the entire place begins to just fill with floodwater, and all of these people are going quite literally into shock from how cold the water is. And even Anduin himself, by the time that he's finished helping all of these people and dragged into like one of these main buildings where he sees just a bunch of essentially refugees from the city itself, all trying to warm up, he is then given a change of clothing to warm up himself. And he is just like, I think we should reach out to my dad, she eventually tells Jaina. And Jaina's like, yeah, that might be hard. Varian's actually not in Stormwind anymore. And she kind of says this on accident, and Anduin's like, where is he? And that's when it dawns on him, Varian's going to Ironforge. And he tells Jaina, he's like, but he'll be spotted, like they'll be killed. And this is what Jaina says, he's with a bunch of SI7, they're not going to be spotted. And we've never discussed the SI7 before. I think they're super cool. They're basically like the CIA of the Stormwind ranks. Like they're this like intelligence group blended with literal assassin super murderers.
Mostly rogues,
yeah. And that's when he begs Jaina. He's like, please, like, I need to go. Like, he believes that Moira is completely irredeemable, but I don't think so. I think that she is doing it the wrong way. But doing this isn't going to send the right message. And she's like, you know, like, maybe we can wait a little bit and I can help you out. And he's like, no, he's on the way now. I need you to teleport me to Ironforge now. And that is where we do cut to beneath Stormwind in this train line that is the Deep Run Tran, as Varian Wrynn, without his blade Charlemagne, instead these two short swords dressed like one of the SI7 operatives, joined with 20 of their best assassins, make their way through the Deep Run Tran. And I wish I could do this part of the story justice. It is so fucking cool, because literally every time like they describe it, they're like, yep, there's like 6 Dark Irons watching the tunnel, and then by the time Varian even has the chance to reach like the group, he doesn't even get the chance to attack any of them, because the SI7 have literally killed them all within a matter of half a second, as they're like all foaming from their mouth with these poisons and have their throats slit with and whatnot. It's a really cool story. I think that this is one of my favorite parts of the novel, where Varian is with these SI7. But yeah, they completely slaughter this group of guards that are just before just laughing and playing cards together, poisoned, garroted, and slain in a single stroke. And they begin to continue to make their way to Ironforge, as it is just ahead. And that's when Anduin steps through the portal into Ironforge, back in the Hall of Mysteries, where he sees Father Rohan. And he's like, hey, my dad's on the way, and he's going to kill Moira because he thinks she's a usurper. And Rohan's like, but she's not a usurper. She's just an idiot. And Anduin's like, yeah, I know. That's why I need you to get me to her right now so that I can talk my dad out of this. And he's like, okay. And just as they're about to arrive, the sound of chaos breaks out throughout Ironforge as you hear the sound of SI7 just slaughtering these Dark Irons, and Varian spots the doorway to the royal quarters, and it just says that he immediately rushes for it, slamming his shoulder into it as he begins to hear guards on the other side preparing to face him. 3 of his other SI7s join up with him, and they just smash this door in, and Varian drops the 2 guards within, where a Moira, Bronzebeard Thaurissan, stands on the bed screaming for bloody murder as Varian grabs her by the wrist, holds a sword up to her throat, and drags her out into the Great Forge. Holding her at sword point, he denounces her in front of everybody, being like, here stands your usurper. Here stands a tyrant, an agent of the enemy. And in this moment, Moira just looks to him and says, kill me then. Let them all see what kind of king you are. And just as Varian is about to turn her into a bloody pile on the floor, Anduin bursts in, screaming for his father to stop. And he's like, I need you to show restraint. Like, not out of sentiment, but conviction. Like, Moira is the legitimate heir, and it's not her fault that Magni treated her like shit. And Varian and him go back and forth, and they're like, he's just like, justice belongs to the dwarves. Like, if she died by a human king, nothing but civil war would follow. And Varian stands frozen for a second, where this drop of blood begins pouring from Moira's throat from the sword that he's holding up to her throat. And as he pleads with him more and more, eventually Varian does let Moira go, and he says, all right, well, I am going to let you go. I'm not going to kill you, but your empire, it's over. You being queen, it's over. What is going to happen now is you're going to be the representative for the Dark Iron Dwarves. We're going to get Falstad Wildhammer of the Airy Peak to come over here, and he's going to represent the Wildhammer clan. And when Muradin or Bran finally fucking show up, because, I mean, they've been summoned a long-ass time ago, like, where are you at? They will represent the Bronzebeards of Ironforge, and there will be no single dwarf ruler. You will be, from here on out, the Council of the Three Hammers. And, well, Moira reeling, and not really having an option, is just like, okay, I guess we'll try it out. Because, again, these clans haven't really been united in decades, but this is the best course of action that Varian can come up with, as he then begins to hug Anduin, and his face fills with pride. He's just like, I had come here to prepare to kill basically everybody if it came to that. And Anduin's just like, I'm happy that you changed your mind, and with that, I believe Ironforge will be stronger for it. And Varian does see not just his son, but he sees an equal. He sees a true royal of Stormwind and a person who can bring peace. And he says, you've taught me more than I've taught you. And that is where we come back to Thrall, where he is preparing to leave Garadar as he is approached by Perith Stormhoof, who we mentioned was that initial Tauren that specifically was like Cairne's main Tauren messenger. And he tells him, he's like, Cairne's dead, Garrosh poisoned him. It was kind of an accident, but still, shit's going crazy. The Grimtotem sees Thunder Bluff. Yeah, just all sorts of shit's going on. And it says the pain hits Thrall like a hammer to the chest as he thinks, he's like, I had left to save the world, and as I left it abandoned, it has bled.
He's finally seeing he messed up.
Does he, though?
Because
he also gets this message from Polkar, the attendant to Drekthar, like we mentioned, and he begins to see all the predictions that Drekthar's been making. The land will weep and the world will break. And he is concerned because he's like, Draenor once shattered. Is Azeroth going to be next? And with this, he's like, yeah, Agra, I definitely have to go now. There's no point in staying here any longer. I need to go back. My people need me. And Agra's like, and I'm coming with you too. And he's like, you are? I think it's one of the, this Thrall storyline in general, I think, is one of the weakest parts of this entire novel. The Tauren story and the dwarf story is way more interesting to me. But over this time span, Agra and Thrall have become significantly less tense with each other. And as a matter of fact, Agra's giving him the fuck me eyes these days. So, despite having to leave Nagran, Thrall is filled with a sense of joy from that fact that Agra will be joining him. And as he then leaves, as he arrives back in Azeroth, the funeral rites for Cairne Bloodhoof begins. as his body rests atop this great pyre in the colors of the Earth Mother of brown, tan, and green. He stands in silent vigil in his Doomhammer armor, and he's just somber. It says that he literally waits for, it has to have been hours, because they talk about how the sun changes position in the sky while he's just standing there mourning the loss of his friend. And he asks, very similar to the way Cairne did, he says, "Old friend, are you still here?" Basically like questioning if the spirit of Cairne is still here. And there's no answer, only the wind. As he then begins to confess to Cairne's corpse, he's like, "I wish that our final words had been something of joy, of something of family. You're my oldest friend here and you're dead, and we ended on such bad terms." As he discusses his regret to shield Cairne from the betrayal. And he does say, like, despite all this, I know that if you saw Baine, you would be so proud of the leader that he's become, how strong and wise he is. Like, I know that you already knew this, but you would truly be filled with so much pride to see him. And as he looks up to the sky, he thinks about his own leadership. And he's like, is my place with the Horde, or is it with the elements? Is it with Azeroth? And he then begins taking off his Doomhammer armor piece by piece as it drops to the grass beneath him. And beneath, he is now just in his prayer robes that he had been in before, and puts on the prayer beads of the shaman. And he says, he basically is just like, the Horde does not need me as war chief as much as Azeroth needs me to save it as a shaman. And with that, he does come to the conclusion that he is not going to retake the mantle of war chief. He is going to be a shaman. Like, bro, you're standing at the corpse of your fucking friend, and you're literally just like, I didn't choose the wrong path. I did everything. Fucking, what is this ending? I hate this fucking ending. I try not to give too much bias. It just doesn't make an ounce of fucking sense to me. And I get that they tried to build it up. It just doesn't make sense in terms of his relation to Cairne. Like, it really just kind of feels like he's just like, that's tough, buddy. Anyway, Agra, you trying to go make some little baby goels, or?
Who wrote this book?
Christy Golden.
Oh, I thought you were trying to hype her up before.
I think the rest of the story is amazing. The scene with Varian and the SI7, impeccable. I think the political aspects of it, of seeing these figures all like carry the burden of leadership from Garrosh to Magni to Anduin Rising, I think is so well tied together. This one just doesn't make sense. And I think it's more because this is where Blizzard wanted the story to go for Thrall, not as much Christy Golden. Because, I mean, she also wrote Rise of the Horde, and I think all the characters in that novel fucking impeccable. Regardless, Thrall then picks up one of the fragments of the rune spear that Cairne is to be cremated with, and he looks at the rune on it, and it reads healing. And as he begins to make his way away from Cairne's pyre, he feels the ground beneath his feet begin to cry out in this terrible groan that echoes across all of Morgor, as the elements are no longer whispering to him. They are screaming, and deep beneath Azeroth, he feels something stirring, like a clap to his soul. And he realizes this is what the Furies were warning of. This is the fear that Gordog had warned me about. And this is, whatever is coming, it's not going to be stopped with swords. Or is it? As Drekthar snaps awake in a frenzy, screaming, "The oceans will boil, the oceans will boil." And in that moment, Stormwind Harbor falls silent as the tide sharply recedes out into the ocean. And all the people that are in the harbor walking about, they're like, that's a bit weird. By the way, guys, if you ever see the ocean unnaturally receding really fast, it's time to get to high ground. It's just good knowledge to have. Because as soon as the sea drags all the way out, it returns with a massive, unnaturally massive tidal wave that just flips all the ships in the harbor, smashing them into the docks, everything, all the people, all the vessels gone in an instant. And it is as if the world itself has cracked open. There are these the windswept plains of Westfall outside of the city, where these sinkholes begin to just crumble and open up. These vortexes begin ripping all across Azeroth as Thrall feels the world's pain in his bones. And there's no clear answer where it's coming from. Only the elements weeping and screaming in anguish as Thrall collapsed to the floor from the pressure of everything that he's feeling. As the vision becomes clearer in the chaos, he realizes where all of this agony is coming from. the Maelstrom, where the Well of Eternity once sat right in the middle of the Great Sea currently. He feels that is where it's coming from before he blacks out. And eventually Agra and Baine are standing over him as he wakes up, and he sits up and tells them, like, I have a vision, like the wound is at the Maelstrom and I need to go there before there's no time left. And in that moment, it is the decision's basically made for him. Thrall doesn't have the ability to carry the weight of the Horde. He has got to carry the weight of Azeroth. So he begins to go and prepare to make his way to the Maelstrom to see what he can do to save Azeroth. And that is where we get the final scene of this novel, where Drekthar, still in his fear, screaming out to Polkar, who is kneeling beside him, doing what he can to try and soothe him, like tells him, like, what is happening? What's happening? And Drekthar says, someone is breaking down the door. Do not let them in. And that's where our story ends for today.
So Thrall won't be ahead of the Horde even after this.
Tomfoolery, if you ask me, bro. Like,
but now he'll definitely give it to Baine, right?
I give it to Baine. I mean, fucking Eitrig came in clutch during this novel too. Like, even the Darkspear did. So, okay, something that really pisses me off, right? Like, I will say that this novel gave me more respect for Garrosh than I initially had, because initially I was like, well, like, I feel like he wouldn't really care if he poisoned Cairne and won that way. But I think the biggest detriment that I can give to Garrosh is that he doesn't help Thunder Bluff. And, like, even when we think about, like, Thrall leading the Horde when the Undercity fell, it's not like he was like, well, they're traitors, like, leave them on their own to do their thing. No, he mounted the Horde to go retake fucking Horde territory. He was a leader.
Yeah.
Even though, like, so many people had died at the Wrathgate because of these people that he's going to save, they're still Horde. And I think that's, like, kind of the biggest disconnect between Thrall and Garrosh as leader. And even more on top of that, like, Garrosh is so fucking lucky that the Tauren did not turn to Alliance, which I feel like is a weird thing to say. But when you think about it, who did help to save Thunder Bluff? Who provided the gold to hire those mercenaries to buy the bombs?
Right.
Jaina fucking Proudmoore. Once again, the savior of the Horde.
You know, Jaina just let the Horde burn. Wouldn't the world be better off?
Her world, probably. But
or no,
we
because we
had
to come together to defeat many villains. Is that the reasoning?
Yeah.
To keep them going?
Well, and just like even from that perspective, like, let's theorize that after this event, after Theramore does aid the Tauren in reclaiming Thunder Bluff, like, could you imagine how shit of a position the Horde would be in if they didn't have Thunder Bluff? They would be surrounded on all sides by the Draenei, the Night Elves, the humans, and the Taurens, and they'd be completely isolated on Durotar.
What do you mean? We also have Undercity and...
Yeah, well, but their only allies would be an ocean away.
I guess so.
Just like from a militaristic standpoint,
Yeah.
the fact that he does not aid the Tauren is tomfoolery to the highest degree. But Garrosh hasn't even hit anywhere near the apex of his tomfoolery, so we'll get to that. Any other questions and comments before we end today, Tim?
No, let us know who you think would win, Cairne or Garrosh. 1v1, no poison.
Yep, I'm real curious what you guys have to think about that. I'm also curious, do you guys think that it was appropriate for Garrosh to not go and aid the Tauren in this time? Like, we do get a note that Baine, like, specifically doesn't request help from him, but, like, show up anyway, right? But yeah, let us know what you guys think. If you did make it this far, make sure you drop us a like, a comment, a subscribe, a 5-star if you're over on Spotify. You guys have really been killing it. We are making our way up to that 1,000 subscriber goal over on YouTube, like we're really trying to push for, as well as we are really closing in on 200 followers over on Spotify. You guys have been leaving tons of 5-star reviews, so we really appreciate that. And we will see you guys next week as we begin to move into the actual gameplay expansion of the Cataclysm. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.